My name's Elliot Higgins. I'm the founder of the Brown Moses blog and also a website called Bellingcat. Over the last few years, I've looked at ways to use social media and what we call open source information to investigate conflict zones. And we've looked at the Syrian conflict, and we've looked at the Ukrainian conflicts and lots of other little bits and pieces. So I'm going to take you through some of the techniques and tools we use. I'm going to explain some of the case studies we have, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. I'm going to start off with one of the most common tools we use. Now, in the work we do, we look at a lot of satellite map imagery, because what we do, we look at images from videos and photographs, and we compare what's in those videos and photographs to what's visible on satellite map imagery. And this is a process we call geolocation, but to begin with, it's always good to have an idea how to get to this satellite map imagery, what you can find. So I'm going to use an example that relates to the downing of MH17 on July 17th, 2014 in Ukraine. A few days after MH17 was shot down, the Russian Ministry of Defense had a press conference where they presented what they claimed was evidence linking the Ukrainian government to the downing of MH17. Now, as part of that evidence, they presented a series of satellite map images. And this is one of the examples here. This is a Ukrainian anti-aircraft defense base on July 14th. They also shared a picture on July 17th. Now, the point they were trying to make, I'll just show you here, were this is a Buck missile launcher, which many people said has shot down MH17. And this is the July 14th image. And if you just have a look at that missile launcher, you should hopefully see, unfortunately it's a bit light in here, but the missile launcher has actually moved. It's gone. So their implication was on July 17th, this missile launcher had left the base. Now, that's obviously an interesting claim, but it's possible to kind of verify if these images are genuine. And we use Google Earth for that. You can download this for free, and what it gives you access to is a massive amount of satellite map imagery. So you can plug in the coordinates of a site you're interested in, and it takes you to that site, and you can turn on something called historical imagery. And that gives you imagery that Google Earth has from, in some cases, many images going back months and months, and it gives you this handy little slider. And it's as simple as sliding back and forth, and you can travel through time and see what certain locations look like on certain days. And this is very useful for a number of reasons. In the case of these images, you can see things like this. The top left image is the Russian Ministry of Defense image from July 14th. You then have imagery from Google Earth. Now, what's interesting with this is you can see I've highlighted these three vehicles. This is a vehicle yard, and if you look at all the imagery in this vehicle yard, these vehicles barely ever move. It's used for storage, they're damaged, they're not in a good state, so they don't move about much. So what you have here is the top middle images from Google Earth on April 28th. The vehicles are in the same position. Then May 30th, the vehicles are in the same position, but then it comes to July 2nd, and the vehicles have moved about. And then if you look at the July 21st image, those vehicles are still in that position, and then at the end of July, they're still in that position. Yet, the Russian Ministry of Defense is saying on July 14th, those vehicles were in the positions they were in April and May, not that you can see on Google Earth in July. So that's interesting, but vehicles can move. That's not anything too devastating. Now we have this. This is a patch of grass which has been worn away. You can see it more clearly in the middle July 14th image, but it's also visible in the July 17th image from the Russian Ministry of Defense. Now, what's interesting, if you look at the imagery at the top right corner here, unfortunately it's very, very light in here, so you might have to trust me a bit on this. The April 28th image, that grass isn't worn away. The May 30th image, that grass is actually worn away, but the July imagery from Google Earth, that grass is grown back. So we have an image from the 2nd of July and the 21st of July where that grass is present, and that's visible on satellite map imagery. Yet in the Russian Ministry of Defense imagery, that grass is gone. Another example here, unfortunately you can't see very well because of the light, is in the July 14th imagery you can see, you may just be able to make this out if you've got very, very good eyesight, but there's trees here, and in all these other images they're actually gone. Could we get the lights off, if possible?
I think it's daylight.
Every little help, hopefully. Yeah, so it's a little bit clearer. So in the July 2nd and July 21st imagery, all those trees have gone. Now, that's obviously a big issue because trees don't grow that fast that they can appear in a July 14th image and not in a July 21st and July 2nd image. Another example, there's track marks that are missing. So time and time again, there's issue with these imagery. So what we then did, we actually went and we examined some of these images. For example, this is the Buk missile launcher. That doesn't move in any of the imagery apart from the imagery provided by the Russian Ministry of Defense. So what we did, we actually crowdfunded the purchase of satellite map imagery from a company called Digital Globe. Digital Globe has satellites that takes imagery from all over the world, and if you're lucky, sometimes they'll pass over an interesting area at exactly the time you need them to. Just so you know, because lots of people get surprised by the pricing for this, because they say it's only $35 per square kilometre. You have to buy at least 25 square kilometres, so that's $500 straight away. And then it's another $1,500 to actually publish anything. So it's an expensive hobby, and that's why we crowdsourced it. But we got the money, and it gave us this image. And this image was taken at 11:08 Ukrainian time. And what's interesting is the Russian Ministry of Defense said their image was from about 11:30. They didn't actually give the time zone though. So all we can say for sure is this image is about 35 minutes within the time the Russian image was taken. So that makes the discrepancies even more interesting. So we reviewed the image and we found 4 major, very clear discrepancies. So the left-hand side is the Digital Globe image from July 17th. The middle is the Ministry of Defense image from July 14th, and the right hand is the July 17th image from the Ministry of Defense. In the Ministry of Defense, you can clearly see the grass has been worn away, and that isn't visible in the July 17th image. Now, as there's only half an hour's difference, they either had a hell of a gardener or a hell of a party in that time. Another difference is if you look at the July 14th imagery from the Ministry of Defense, which is on the right-hand side, there's lots of trees there. July 17th, all those trees are gone. So again, there's a huge difference. And if we actually look at the position of the missile launcher that supposedly moved, it's still there on July 17th within half an hour. And that's very interesting because we also we searched for people on social media who was part of that unit. What's quite interesting, there's a site called VKcom. It's basically the Russian Facebook. And they have groups for people in certain military units. So you just have to look at that VK.com group and you find everyone in that unit. And one guy was posting these photographs, and we established that this was the one that was moved according to the Russian Ministry of Defense. This was posted in August, and you can see there's a pretty major part of damage on the right-hand side of it. The tracks are really, really rusted. And that seems to support the idea that this hasn't moved for a very long time. There's also imagery from December that showed, almost certainly taken in the summer because it's certainly not snowing there, which shows that, again, it's heavily damaged. So based on all that information, we were able to look at the Russian Ministry of Defense images, show there are lots of discrepancies, and this was just using Google Earth. This was a free platform. The only reason we brought the Google Earth satellite, the Digital Globe satellite map imagery, is because of the amount of controversy this produced. And we just wanted to show for 100% certain that this was correct. So yeah, I mean, this is one example where you can establish, that a government is lying. And this was in the Russian Ministry of Defense's major July 21st press conference on the downing of MH17. And this was not only a lie, but they faked evidence. We'll come back to that later, but going back to where I started writing about Libya. Mainly arguing about it on message boards, to be honest with you, before I started my blog. And really, I just wanted to win arguments about where stuff was being filmed. So someone said to me, well, how do you know where these places are filmed? And I thought, well, how do I know? And this is where I came up with the idea of using satellite map imagery. So here's a very simple example. This is from a town called Tiji in Libya in the summer of 2011. And this was part of a video film saying they'd just captured this town. This is from the rebels. And I wanted to be sure that this was actually in the right location. So there's quite a bit of imagery in here, information in here that's useful. So for example, we have this mosque. It's got a very distinct dome and minaret. We've also got a road, which has got a tank driving down it, so we know it's a wide road. So we looked at the imagery of Tiji, and this is what the town looks like. You can see there's this major road running through the middle of it. So straight away, you should check that out. You can zoom all the way in, and with Google Earth, you get quality of imagery that you can see vehicles. And you can kind of estimate how wide things are based on the position and width of the vehicles as well. So we can see a tank would easily drive down those roads. And so it was just a case of then traveling down the road on Google Earth until we found this mosque. And as you can see clearly here, you can see the minaret, you can see the kind of kink in the outer wall, and you can see the dome on top of it. You can also see the wall that runs around the bottom of it and the curve in the road. And you can also use the position of the minaret in relation to the dome to figure out the position of the camera as well. Another example, oops, I just skipped through. This is from Brega in Libya. Around the same time, this is another video claiming they captured Brega. Now, the thing with Brega, it was a front line in the conflict, and it was very important. And there was a constant kind of back and forth about people making claims they captured this, they captured that. So the issue with this video is you can see lots of buildings and stuff like that, but there's no really big landmarks that are obvious. And this is Brega itself. It's a large area. It's got industrial districts, residential districts. So the question was then, how, without big landmarks, can you figure out where this is? Well, there is one really major landmark here, and it's the roads they're walking on. This video is about 4 minutes long, and through it they walk down streets, they turn corners, and I made a very crude little map here that shows you the route they take and what roads they can see. And there's only one area in Brega that has those kind of curvy roads. And basically what I took the map I made, and I looked at every single part of this area, all the roads, to kind of find a perfect match. And eventually, I found this area here that matched perfectly to it. And it was then possible to watch the video again, and those buildings that were too small to be really, major landmarks, then could give us indications of where, if the camera was in the right position. For example, very close to the end of the video, this is where the video ends, and just at the end, he films this kind of open area just behind himself. Without, with just that open area in the video, it would have been very hard to find it. But because I could watch the video and kind of follow his route as he was going along it, and he filmed that open area at the right time, I could confirm that was the correct location. Now, I started my blog, the Brown Moses blog, in 2012, in March. And very early on, I realized that the Syrian opposition had their own YouTube accounts, Facebook pages, social media accounts that they use on a regular basis, which meant you could check them on a regular basis. And this is one of the videos I came across whilst I was doing these regular checks. It's very simple to do. Subscribe to a bunch of YouTube channels and just see what's on your subscriptions. And this is the first ever video of cluster bomb remains that came from Syria. And this was simply just by watching the videos, going through them time and time again. And this was the first ever use of cluster bombs, and I took this to Human Rights Watch. They published a piece on it. Usual criticism of cluster bomb use. This was back in July 2012. And then there wasn't really many more of these videos that appeared online. That was until October 2012, where all of a sudden we had lots and lots of videos like this. These show the remains of cluster bombs and cluster munitions. And in October, all of a sudden, there were lots of these videos. It's like every day you'd have 10 new videos from across the country. Now, the Syrian government denied they were using cluster bombs despite the video evidence. So Human Rights Watch asked me to start cataloguing all of them. And over a period of a few months, I found 400 or 500 videos like this and gave that to Human Rights Watch. And they were able to use that for presentations, for information, campaigns. And this has lots of different uses. Obviously, there's a media interest in the use of these munitions, but also it means that they can direct educational efforts in these areas, because a lot of these videos had people picking up live cluster bombs. A couple of the videos even had what happened afterwards to some of them. And the problem is, this was an issue that was coming up time and time again. After the conflict is over, whenever that might be, the mine removal organisations can go out there and focus their efforts in these areas where there's a large amount of cluster bomb use. Another munition that was very well known in the Syrian conflict was this. This is the first ever video of a barrel bomb that came from Syria. For those of you who don't know, a barrel bomb is an improvised bomb. It began as a barrel filled with explosive and shrapnel and lit with a fuse and chucked out the back of a helicopter. But obviously, some people didn't believe that. This is barrel bomb baloney on Russia Today saying barrel bombs don't exist. It's just a load of nonsense. But thanks to tracking kind of social media and just watching these videos as they were posted online over a period of time, evidence started coming out. So this is the first ever video I found of a barrel bomb being thrown out of a helicopter, which you just can see just there. This very well-known video shows a barrel bomb as it's being lit and then pushed out the back of a helicopter. Now, the thing with Syria and many Arab conflicts, you often have claims like, well, how do you know this isn't a film set in Qatar? How do you know this isn't, this Hollywood special effects, blah, blah, blah. But in this case, you can do something with Google Earth. You can find this village, and if you start searching for all the villages in the area where this video was taken from, you can actually find the village on Google Earth and match it up identically to it and match it perfectly. Later on, we found this video. This is from a captured airbase where they found the barrel bombs ready to be deployed. We found from the same airbase a helicopter with a ramp system in the back. And this was kind of the first wave of barrel bomb use. They were kind of very crude. They were basically metal cylinders with a fuse. They lit the fuse, pushed it out the back of a helicopter. They weren't very effective. They were pretty rubbish, actually, as weapons. The problem is the fuses, if they were too long, the bomb would just crash into the ground and break apart anyway and wouldn't explode. Too short, and they'd explode midair. But the Syrian government came up with a new type of barrel bomb, which you can see here. It was far more effective, far more powerful, and they're used far more widely. Now it kind of has this standardized design that's used very frequently. And we know that because, again, we can use all this information that's being shared on social media to discover this information. And this is as simple as having a list of YouTube subscriptions and just checking them every so often to see what interesting stuff's there. So a video like this is a barrel bomb, a new type being pushed out the back of a helicopter. Now, a lot of the Syrian opposition groups have nice high HD cameras, which means you can get screenshots like this of one of the barrel bombs in midair as it's falling. Now, from this, we can actually learn quite a bit and understand how it's put together, and combining it with other evidence, we can have a much greater understanding of how these work and kind of the evolution and how seriously this design is being taken. So you can see there's 3 tail fins, there's this kind of plate on the front, and then there's this thing sticking out the side. And we can see these in videos like this. So you can see the tail fins in the background, you can see the metal plate there. The metal plate has detonation cords sandwiched between it, so when it hits on the ground, it causes it to explode. The tail fins are so it always points downwards, so it's a more effective fuse. And this photograph, this was actually posted on the Martyrs page of a Hezbollah member. This actually shows him in the back of a transport helicopter, and again you can see the 3 tail fins. And you realise they have 3 tail fins because if they didn't, they'd scrape along the bottom of the helicopter and be very difficult to push out. And they've even got wheels on the bottom of them to help them push them out the back of helicopters. So this is something that's very, they've put thought into this. This isn't just them chucking stuff into a barrel and pushing it out of the helicopter anymore. And this same design is used over and over again. Probably thousands of these have been produced to the exact same design. And there was an evolution in barrel bombs again. This is a video that's from the first alleged chlorine barrel bomb attack in Kafr Zita in April 2014. And again, the remains of these gave us more clues. This is the remains of a barrel bomb, the same type you saw in the back of the helicopter, but rather than being filled with explosives, it's got a red and yellow gas cylinder in the back. And what they're doing here, they're removing a blue cord, and that's explosive cord. And the reason it's wrapped around the neck of the cylinder like that is because if you have a large explosion, it'll burn up all the chlorine and be very ineffective. So they wanted to make something that's effective. So this design results on the end being popped off. And we know that's the case because we have examples like this where it's functioned. You can see the cylinder where the end has been cut off by the explosion. But what's interesting is I found this other barrel bomb video. Now, this was just through my various searches. I was just putting the Arabic word for barrel in just to see what would come up. And what's interesting about this is it's a completely different design. And in fact, it's a completely different country. This is in Iraq. This is the Iraqi Air Force using it in Fallujah several months ago. And this was, again, the first evidence that these were being used, and Human Rights Watch got involved. They spoke to the State Department. The State Department spoke to the Iraqi government, and the Iraqi government promised not to use improvised bombs from the back of helicopters. But they've got plenty of other bombs, but at least they don't use this type anymore. So this kind of systematic review of content coming from conflict zones, you can find all these interesting little stories. And reviewing these videos isn't hours and hours of work. I would go through the videos like half an hour, maybe, and this was 1,000 YouTube channels. I could check them all in half an hour because it was just a stream of videos, and after a while you get an eye for what's interesting. And one thing I looked at a lot were the munitions being used. And this video shows a series of weapons that I've noticed at the start of 2013. And again, this is just from systematically watching these videos. We have the RBG-6 grenade launcher, the M79 rocket launcher, the M60 recoilless gun, which is a kind of piece of mobile artillery, and finally, at the end, the RPG-22 rocket launcher. Now, what's interesting about this is I realized that these were very unusual weapons. I hadn't seen them in the conflict before. And 3 of the weapons had links to Croatia. 2 of them were used in the former Yugoslavia. 1 was used, actually manufactured in Croatia. And the RPG-22 was used by the Croatian military. So there were 3 that were linked to the kind of arms used there, and 1 that was kind of used by the military. And I did something very simple. I put them into a spreadsheet. I got the dates, the locations from the video titles, the names of the groups who were posting them. I looked up the names of the groups on Google just to see who they were. And it turned out they were all regarded as moderate opposition groups, and they had various Western allies who were reportedly supporting them. I took this information to the New York Times, who had asked me to do a blog post for that war blog. And they investigated further. They showed the videos to various officials, and it turned out it was actually the Saudis buying the weapons from Croatia, flowing them to Jordan, and smuggling them into the south of the country to moderate opposition groups. And that ended up as 2 New York Times front pages. But this was supposed to be a top secret operation no one was supposed to know about. Yet they posted hundreds of videos of them using the weapons on YouTube, on publicly available channels that anyone could find, because they don't think that someone like me is going to come along, pull it into a spreadsheet and come up with an idea. So you'd be amazed what people put online. You know, you'll see that more later when I speak about Ukraine. Now, I didn't start off knowing lots about weapons and munitions. I'm entirely self-taught. I knew nothing when I started doing this. I, couldn't really tell the difference between different kinds of weapons, but I had to learn how to research them online by myself. And this is an example of how I did one. This is a remains of a rocket. Now, I was kind of familiar with rockets by this point. This was like 2 years into the conflict, so I'd seen plenty. And this was a new one to me. I hadn't seen it. And what was really interesting, it has this, you can see this chamber it has. And I'd learned that if something's got a chamber in it, it's usually carrying cluster munitions. And I looked around, looked at other videos posted on this channel, and there was one video saying, "Oh, we've been cluster bombed," but there wasn't a picture of the cluster bomb. So all I had was this, remains of the rocket. So simple bit of editing, I just stitched it together just to make it easier to look at rather than being lots of different frames. And you can see it's pretty big, and I had no idea what it was. So I went to the Wikipedia page for the equipment of the Syrian army. And I wouldn't say this is the final source you could use for anything, but there's a lot of people who put stuff on Wikipedia, and it's a good starting place. So I went through, and they have a nice little table of all the multiple launch rocket systems, and they have a nice table of all the tactical ballistic missiles that Syria uses. And the one thing that really was interesting is the different widths, because if I could figure out the width of the munition in the video, I could figure out which one of these it could be, and then start my investigation from there. So the question was, how do I measure this? How do I know how wide that is? So I noticed the guy's foot was there, so I cut his foot off and turned it around and used it to measure the width of the rocket. Problem is, I don't know how long someone's foot is, and I don't even know if he's a size 3 or a size 11. So what I did, I went to an online shoe size conversion chart. I put in size 4 and size 11. He might have small feet or he might have big feet, so I wanted to kind of give him a chance. And he gave me a range, 235 millimeters to 279 millimeters. So I could look at his foot again and kind of, get a rough idea. It was around 300 centimeters, millimeters, I would say. That was kind of a guess. So I looked at all these different rockets. So you have like the Luna M, and that is 55 centimeters wide. That's far too wide. And then you have down to like the BM24, for example. That's 240 millimeters. That's actually a bit too short. And I came across this one, the BM30 Smirch. What was interesting, this wasn't actually on the Wikipedia page. Syria hadn't apparently got these weapons. So it was very interesting that this was actually 300 millimeters wide. So I thought maybe it's this, but interesting that no one knows that Syria has these. And there's no material online anywhere about them having these rockets. So that was even more interesting. So I started looking up for reference photographs, because what you find, it's very useful when you're looking at the remains of munitions to have lots of reference photographs, because you don't have a kind of perfect untouched thing. You have lots of scraps of metal. So you want to look at all the tiny little details. And finding those detailed photographs are quite difficult, because generally kind of militaries don't tend to share that kind of thing. But what they do have is military museums and people who go to military museums with really good cameras. And this is some Russian guy who went to a military museum and found the display models of these rockets. And he took very high resolution photographs. So what I could do is then compare the rocket to the remains of the rocket side by side and see that the little screw holes are in the same position. I could see the fuse was the same kind of design. I could see the warhead had the same kind of plates, and all the bolts and stuff were in the same position. I could also see, because it had a cutaway, the cluster munition chamber, which has these holes along kind of the inner ribs, which are also visible on the wreckage. And that's the only rocket I could find anywhere that had those holes. So we could piece together from all these different sources and establish what this was. A bit later, someone found the other half of the rocket. As you can tell, these things are quite big. What happens is they break in two when they're flying through the air, so the back end tends to land somewhere else, and the front end lands separately. And just to double check, we made a composite image of the wreckage of the rocket in the middle and compared it to the rocket at the top and this sketch of a rocket below. And it seemed to be the same one. So this is using lots of different multiple sources. Basically, it's just Googling stuff. I mean, finding that photograph was me just putting in the name of the rocket and looking through all the page results one by one. It's time-consuming, but it found me the perfect image I needed. So this video is from Egypt in 2013. This is the protest camps being cleared. And there's a woman there with a camera wearing blue. And just after that video cut, she gets shot. And you can see she's unarmed, she's carrying a camera, yet she was shot as the protests were being cleared. So again, we want to confirm where this is filmed. This time, we don't seem to have that much information. You can see these three apartment buildings, you can see a corner of a building, but there's really not too much there. And I did a very, very rough sketch, and this is just to demonstrate you don't need to be a great artist to do this. The camera is where that circle is on the bottom right-hand corner, facing to the west, and those are the buildings. Now, I was very particular to draw the kind of little bits sticking out of the buildings because you'll be able to see that on satellite map imagery. So it was quite easy to find the general location because everyone knew where the protests were taking place. And then it was a matter of searching through the streets. Now, for example, on the left-hand image, you have apartment buildings, but they're quite far apart, and you can use the car to actually measure how far apart they are, roughly. And it was very clear from the video that it couldn't be these apartment buildings. On the right-hand side, the apartment buildings are closer together, but there's loads of trees in the middle of the road, which you don't see in the video. But this one here was a far better match, because you can actually see the shape of the buildings down at the bottom matches to what's visible in my terrible sketch. And you can also see on the top left corner, just here, there's a little structure which just seems perfect for the position of the camera. Now, there's a site called Panoramio, and what Panoramio allows you to do is look at photographs people have taken, and they've geotagged the photographs, which means they've got coordinates, and they can search an area and look for photographs in that area. You can also find the same images on Google Earth, so it's quite handy to use Google Earth to search for these. So, for example, you'll have this. This shows all the photographs that have been taken and tagged in that area by people. And you have different tools like Street View, but this is very useful when you don't have Street View imagery or other imagery from the ground. So I searched through and I found this guy who was taking photographs of the road, and I went to his account and just started cycling through the pictures to see if there was any interesting stuff there. And I came across this photograph. This was tagged very close to the location I thought it could be, and it has a small structure just in the background. And if you zoom into it, you can actually see there's lots of matches. For example, there's a white sign there that's there. The paint is worn off there, but it's just slightly higher than the second bit of paint that's worn off there. There's this concrete lip on the top of the building. This is the same location the video was filmed from. So not only have we been able to prove that this was filmed in the location they said it was, but the exact location, we have a photograph of that spot. So that's the best you can hope for when you're verifying something. Now, onto Ukraine for a bit. I don't know if many of you follow the conflicts in Ukraine closely or what happened to MH17, but there's kind of been a back and forth for MH17 about, what shot down MH17. For a long time, the kind of Russian, point was saying, well, it's a Ukrainian Su-25 fighter. And they kind of stuck to that point until very recently when their Buck manufacturer, the person who manufactures missiles in Ukraine, had a press conference, and they said actually it was a surface-to-air missile all along, but it was definitely a Ukrainian surface-to-air missile. And one of the reasons they said they could be so sure is because the type of missile they identified as the kind of expert Buck manufacturers that shot down MH17 was one called a 9M38M1. Now, that's an older type of missile that they said the Ukrainian government uses, but the Russian government doesn't. So they denied the Russian government had access to these missiles. And that was interesting because we found this photograph. This was from the summer of 2014. And we used Street View imagery to geolocate this. So this is another tool you can use to locate where stuff is. This was from Reuters. They published the location, the general location it was taken in. We can see here's the position of the camera is just before a curve in the road. It's a very long and straight road going into a town. And we looked around that area, and there's very few areas like that on satellite map imagery, where there's this nice long straight road heading into a town with a kink in it, like you can see here. So we wanted to double check if this is correct. So we simply put the little yellow man you can drag onto the street, and it gives you a Street View image, which looks something like this. But you can see, you look at this and you say, well, that looks nothing like that photograph. But that's, it's to do with lens, all kinds of technical stuff that these guys probably know more about than I do. But what you can do is start traveling down this road. You can just kind of drive down this road and you start seeing matches. So for example, you can see the petrol station that's on that road, which is visible in the photograph. You can see the house that's just behind it with that white window is also visible in the street view imagery. This green roof building is also there, and rather helpfully, this very obvious looking church. Now, there was something very, very interesting about this photograph that made us want to look into it, because this is in Russia. This is a Russian convoy in Russia with some trucks that are carrying missiles. And the missile casings have 9M38M1 written on them. The same kind of missiles the Russian Buck manufacturer said Russia definitely doesn't have. There's something else interesting about this photograph. Something very interesting, in fact. But to give it context, I'm going to go back to July 17th, and I'm going to take you through the work we did then. So on July 17th, after MH17 had been shot down, I hadn't really been looking at Ukraine at all, and then lots of people came to me by email and on Twitter saying, can you look at these photographs of this missile launcher? So they sent me a photograph like this, which was a photograph from Torres, and we wanted to verify where it was taken. So we used various techniques to do that. So this gives you an idea of the range of sources you can use, and this was all done with Google and Google Earth and tools available to anyone. It's just a matter of doing lots of Googling, basically. We can see in the photograph there's a missile launcher. It's on the back of a truck with a white cabin, a blue stripe with a yellow sign on the side. And we're trying to run down the location. So one of the Russian speakers I know said this sign could only be so many things. This sign on the shop, although it's obscured, there's only so many words it can be. So he Googled the name of the town and the name of the shop, and it gave us this wiki page. And it's a wiki that's basically showing all the streets in all the towns in eastern Ukraine and elsewhere. And the name of the shop's there, and that gave us the street name and the name of the shop and the town. So we put that into Google, and it gives us this. This is a court record where there's been a fight in the shop, and that gives us the number of the shop on the street. That gave us this exact location. This is the shop. Our initial thought is the camera must be here because this is garage here, but we wanted to be 100% sure. So when we put in the name of the street name, we found some YouTube videos. And they're rather unusual YouTube videos. And what you need to keep an eye out for now is on the top right corner, you can see this building with black and white stripes on the corner, and then the yellow of the shop. It turns out someone in the local area likes driving around filming stuff on his dashboard camera. And this gives us a street view, like we have with Google Earth and Google Maps. And you can see on the left-hand side the black and white stripes of that building, and on the right-hand side the yellow of the shop. And he actually filmed 2 videos of the same location and put them on YouTube. So here he's coming from another direction. The garage where we think the camera was positioned in the photograph is on the right-hand side. The yellow shop hoarding is on the left, and the black and white stripes are there. What we do is then we don't just look at that one bit and say, yep, that's a match. We watch kind of before and after as well, and kind of follow it through on Google Earth and Google Maps to compare what we can see, because there are large landmarks along this road. So you can follow the path and triple check it's the right location. So now we had what we believed was the exact position of the camera. So now we're looking at the shadows in the photograph. Because the shadows, because we know the exact position of the camera, we can use the shadows to tell the time of day. And there's actually a site called Suncalc, which allows you to position the marker to where the position of the sun would be based off the shadows being cast. And that gave us a time of around 12:30, 12 o'clock, that kind of time. So just remember that time for later. This is another video. This one was quite a bit easier. Again, it shows the missile launcher on the same truck. And this was a bit easier because the guy who posted it gave us the time and coordinates. But you never trust anything you see on the internet. So we put the coordinates into Google Earth, which is easy to do. Copy and paste into Google Earth, and you're there. You can see apartment buildings, and now it's a matter of matching what you can see to what's in those what's in the video. So we rotated the camera, got it in the same position as the video camera would be, and then you can start comparing all these little kind of structures that are visible in the video and on the satellite map imagery. And you can compare, as we did with the Brega video, the structure of the roads in the area as well. In fact, I know there were guys from Corrective here yesterday talking about their MH17 work, but they actually went out there and took a photograph of the same location, confirming it was the same place. Now we had that, we had a time of 11:40 and around 12:30, 12:15 in Torres. And I put those two locations into RAC route finder, and it gave me about a travel time of about 35 minutes because I wanted to confirm if that was a time they could actually travel in. So that was like an extra confirmation that this was a viable kind of timeline. This video was from a place called Shizne, which is east of Torres. This is actually later on in the route. And you can actually just see very far in the distance a Buk missile launcher traveling south out of town. Now this would end up being about 2 kilometers from what we consider the almost certain launch site, but it was heading out of town south, and it's unloaded from the transporter. So again, this one I cheated a bit on because I just went on Twitter and said, can anyone find this? Because I was having my tea. So, and within 5 minutes, I had several people saying, "Well, this looks like a likely spot," because what you can see, there's a road, and down the middle there's rows of trees, which is quite unusual in the area. And if you actually compare the video to what's visible in the satellite map imagery, you can see just before the bend in the road, there's 2 trees that are close together, and then one that's kind of separate. And then after the bend in the road, there's 1 tree in the middle, and then 2 roads coming from the east that it's in between. There's also a red-roofed house that's visible there. You'll notice in the video it's filmed from a very high position, which suggests it's from they're either in a helicopter, which seems unlikely, or they're on top of a building. And as you can see here, this is the top of the road, and you can see there's apartment buildings there. So again, we were able to confirm this location. Now, this video was a controversial video. This was posted by the Ukrainian Ministry of Interior. And this shows the Buk missile launcher on, they claimed, the morning of July 18th, the day after, minus a missile. And you can see here that the missile's missing. There's usually a little white warhead in the middle of that. And you can see it's the same truck as well. It's got that blue stripe. It's got this phone number on the side. And the Russian Ministry of Defense disagreed. They said this was actually filmed somewhere else. Hopefully sound will work.
The good example of such fact is that some mass media showed transportation of the launching set of Buk M1 made from, as it is supposed, from Ukrainian territory to Russian territory.
Налицо явная подтасовка материалов.
We can clearly see the facts juggled.
Снимки производились в городе Красноармейске, что подтверждается находящимся рядом с дорогой баннером, на котором указан адрес автосалона на улице Днепропетровская, 34.
These pictures were done in the city of Krasnoarmeysk, that is confirmed by a banner that is situated close to the road. This banner has an address of car shop that is situated on the street Dnepropetrovskaya 34.
So this is their big July 21st press conference. I mentioned at the start of a lecture they presented this fake satellite map imagery there. So, obviously there's a question about the claims they're making. And in this particular video, if you couldn't follow it, they were saying that the sign in the background has a street address on it, and that street address is in government-held territory. Therefore, this video is actually filmed in government-held territory, rather than it being filmed in separatist-controlled Luhansk. So obviously there's a big disagreement there between the Ukrainian Ministry of Interior and the Russian Ministry of Defense. Well, there was coordinates provided for the location it was supposed to be in Luhansk, and there was street view of the area. So the question was then, could we match what was visible in the video to what's in the street view and confirm it's the same location? And there were some matches. So for example, you can see this kind of lamppost on the corner with a path on it. There's this white plate in the middle. There's this kind of painted white on the bottom. But it's not like it's not something I would use to say this is definitely the same location. I'm sure there's lots of lampposts in Ukraine. What we found though was this site, which has traffic cameras for various locations in Luhansk. And unfortunately, the separatists had turned off the traffic cameras a week beforehand. But fortunately, they forgot to remove all the preview images. So we just went into you can use inspect element, which gives you the URL of the JPEG. We downloaded the JPEG, which was not great resolution, but it was good enough. And this is the exact intersection. And for example, you can see the sign here that's visible in the same location. But billboards aren't unique, so what else can we do to match it? Well, using the street view imagery, that's also available on, you're probably familiar with it from Google Earth, but there's a site called Yandex Maps, which also has street view imagery, and that covers lots of Russia and eastern Ukraine we found, which has been very handy for us. So there were these buildings in the background that were visible on the street view imagery, and this is basically the same kind of line that the camera follows from the video. And you can actually compare what's visible in the video below to what's visible in the street view imagery. So you can see the red roof with the white chimney, the silver roof behind it, and the grey silver roof on the right-hand side. So that is visible in the video, and that's kind of, you know, fairly unique. In the first frame of the video, there's also this window frame, which shows that it's filmed from an apartment building, and it's overlooking trees. And just to the west, there's an apartment building overlooking trees that's in exactly the right position. What happened then is the Luhansk local went out and took lots of photographs and posted it on their live journal and tried to recreate some of the shots in the camera. So we could put the lamppost side by side with the one from the video. The actual that kind of black thing that looks like a, you know, asymmetrical butterfly, that's actually electronics from a kind of a little box that's had the cover pulled off. So that's something that's actually fairly unusual. The curb is also a match. You can see the grass is in the same position. It's partly obscured by tree branches. And it seems certain this is the same, you know, Luhansk is the location. So let's look at the billboard. Let's see what was actually on the billboard. Because the Russian Ministry of Defense were convinced it said this, a street address. And unfortunately, it doesn't actually say that at all. It says, you know, I think it says branches nationwide in Russian, which is definitely not a street address. Again, Corrective went out there to investigate our route, and they found this. Someone had done a very specific part of vandalism on that billboard. They'd pulled off that mysterious address. So this was, you know, back at the July 21st press conference. We're tracking the MH17 missile launcher. Just to focus on the press conference, there was another claim they made. They made 4 main claims. I've shown you 2 and shown they're untrue already. This third claim is about the route that MH17 took. Now, the Dutch Safety Board published a report, their first report, and that contained flight path information about the flight path MH17 took. You can also go onto public websites and see flight paths as well. Now, the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed this flight path was, you know, coming from the west, and then it made this big turn, very clear, obvious big turn. Someone redirected MH17 into the path of a Buk missile launcher or Ukrainian Su-25. They weren't too sure at that point. But what's interesting is the Dutch Safety Board report's path is completely different. It stayed on course. It didn't make any major course corrections. They requested to make a very minor course correction to avoid weather, but it's completely different from what the Ministry of Defense said. So that's, you know, 3 out of the 4 claims they made. We can show using open source information. It was simply untrue. Now, there's one more photograph that was very interesting and ties back to where we started. This was published by Paris Match, and this is the first clear view we get of the side of the vehicle. We have 4 photographs now of the missile launcher where you can see it's the same design, it's the same truck. There's a phone number on the side. People phoned up that phone number and Googled it. The owner said, this truck is, my yard was taken over by separatists a couple of weeks ago. The truck cabin is unique. It has a unique paint job, very interesting. And we found the address on the website. We went to the address on Google Earth, and we wanted to find where that photograph was taken. So to start with, we just plotted a route, an RAC route finder from here to the next point we knew it was at in Zorez. And we just followed it along on Google Street View, and we found this location. And we compared the details. The camera position is virtually the same, so a lot of the details are in the same position. So this is a great match. But what's even stronger is the tree branches are pretty much identical and in the same positions. There's not a huge amount of growth. If you want to spend a very long time looking at that, comparing it like I did, then you can, but take my word for it if you don't want to bother. And we actually found, looking through the social media sites used by separatists, we found this photograph from August 6, showing the same truck and trailer being used, but this time they've pulled off the sign with the phone number on it. And then this video from this photograph from the 26th of August, again, they're using the same trailer. So we can say that the separatists are using this trailer, and we're able to track it through separatist-held territory on the day, starting in Donetsk, traveling all the way to Shizne, and then seeing the next morning in Zorez. Now, the reason this is all interesting to us is because we found lots of other videos showing Buk missile launchers, and quite a lot of them are from Russia. And this is one showing a convoy of vehicles. And that convoy was very interesting because it contained one Buk missile launcher that seemed to match really closely to what we could see in the one in Paris Match. And this is in Russia, so that's interesting. So this is a comparison. So we flattened the image and we made sure to keep the perspective, you know, everything correct so it wouldn't skew and cause any issues. And we overlaid the Russian image with the Ukrainian image. So what's interesting is although they've painted over the numbers, there's parts of the numbers that still remain and they're in exactly the same position. The white mark you can see in the middle here, that's loading markings. And they're kind of put on fairly randomly, except in this case, they're in the same position. There's a burn mark over the exhaust that's also in the same position. And most importantly, this rubber skirt, you see along the bottom, kind of has this unique pattern of damage. And what we did, we kind of used it as a fingerprint. We did this with lots of Buck missile launchers as well. We checked this very thoroughly. It took us far too long. But you can see the pattern of damage on the rubber side skirt, which gets damaged over time, is very similar. But there is one difference here. Now that means one of two things. It's either not the same side skirt, because there was only a couple of weeks difference, or at that part of the side skirt, there's a very significant amount of damage. So we went and looked at all the videos we found of this missile launcher, and we found this image here where you can see the side skirt has been turned up, and this is another angle. You can see just in the middle, the side skirt's been bent. So this confirmed all these matches were correct. And these are lots of other examples we checked. We did loads of these. These are all different Buck missile launchers in Ukraine and Russia we could find, which we did comparisons to. None of them matched. None of them had the same markings. None of them had close to the same rubber skirt. And we found lots of videos of this convoy. What we did, if we had 2 videos from the convoy, we'd Google the name of all the towns in between and put it in YouTube, because we'd assume if anyone was filming it, they'd put it with the name of the town. Which is, a lot of this is really down just to Googling a hell of a lot and using date range searches. It's not even that complicated. It's like set a date range, look for a name and go, oh, hey, there's a video, let's look at it. What you have here is the stills from 2 of the videos. Below you have Google Street View images. And we use that to find the exact location every single video was filmed. So we had this long route as it traveled from June 23rd to June 25th. And we looked at the videos and we saw these number plates, and all the number plates ended with 50, which pointed us to it's basically the region it's from. And there's only one air defense base in that region. And it has lots of soldiers there. It's the 53rd Brigade, and they post lots and lots of pictures onto their social media accounts, like this guy. And this guy posted a photograph of a truck. And interestingly, the truck has the same number plate as the one in the convoy, which linked that military unit to that convoy. We wanted to link the guy to the base though. So we found this photograph of him on the parade ground. You can see in the background 2 very large missiles. And in the center of this picture, you can actually see the 2 very large missiles on the playground. There's lots of other elements that match, but this confirmed it. So we looked at more and more images. This is another guy who was actually in the convoy in the 53rd Brigade, who posted photographs from inside the convoy as he was traveling to the border with a missile launcher that shot down MH17. And you won't be able to see this, but if you zoom really, really close, you can actually make out one of the number plates. The left hand is a video from one of the convoy videos. The right hand is from the photograph. And then we'd have stuff like this. Some of the guys were on the bus in the convoy. One of them was fast asleep in the window. You can actually see him sleeping in the window in one of the videos. So using all this information, we were able to kind of bring it all together. So what we started doing then, we thought, well, we've got all these vehicle sightings. Why don't you start collecting them together? So we used a platform called CheckDesk, which is a kind of open verification platform, to ask people to send us sightings of military vehicles. And we've got lots and lots. And we started verifying them collaboratively, and then we used a site called Silk, which allows you to create shareable databases with visualizations. Anyone can go to this site, they can make their own visualizations from the information. If this has got about, I think, 300 or 400 entries now we've put in of military vehicles. And we included things like number plates. And that was interesting, because now every time we see a number plate, we put it into the spreadsheet. We put it into the database, rather, and see if there's any matches. Now, this is the route, this is the 53rd Brigade's convoy. We had lots of videos of that, lots of number plates. And we put it in and compared it to the number plates in that photograph I showed you earlier with the missiles. And it turns out these are video comparisons of number plates in the videos to the number plates in that Reuters photograph of the missiles. And the 53rd Brigade are the vehicles are from the 53rd Brigade in that Reuters photograph. So we've not only been able to confirm that it's the 53rd Brigade transporting those missiles, but they have access to the 9M38M1 missiles that the Russian Buck manufacturer says shot down MH17. So, and we even had a photograph where you can actually see the missiles clearly and confirm that. So by using all this combined information, we were able to, confirm that, not only that they had these missiles, but, they were transporting them in the summer of 2014 as well. And using the same database, we were able to match different vehicles. So on the left-hand side, we have a MSTA-S self-propelled howitzer in Russia in July 30th. And on the right-hand side, we have the same one in Ukraine on September 5th. And we know it's the same one because it's got very unusual markings. Someone's done a really terrible job of writing H2200. That's the loading markings that we saw on the Buck missile launcher. But they've hand-painted it. And the same hand-painted number is visible on the one that was seen in Ukraine. There's also a big splodge of paint that's kind of just random that's also there. There's lots of matching factors. There's another one here. We had a BMP-2, which was seen on August 29th in Russia, and then on February 3rd in 2015. And we can see that because they've got the same word painted on the side. There's, again, a splodge of paint that matches. And time we have those matches. But we can also track Russian soldiers. So this is a guy called Bato. He's a Russian soldier. We know that because this photograph was taken in a camp in the Russian border. We know he was in the camp because lots of other people took photographs in that camp and posted them on their social media profiles, and we could use them to kind of locate everyone in there. And the matching thing was they all took photographs with the puppies, and the puppies are one of them's got this very distinct kind of club shape on the forehead. So there's loads of photographs of these soldiers posing with these puppies. But he also posted this photograph on his social media page. And this was very interesting because this photograph is actually taken in Ukraine. And we were able to prove that because we geolocated it using the methods I explained. But then Simon Ostrowski from Vice News took our work and actually went out to Ukraine and Russia. And I'm just going to show you a clip from a documentary put out recently called Selfie Soldiers on Vice News.
We decided to test the report's methodology by looking into the background of a fighter named Bato Dambayev, an ethnic Buryat from Siberia, whose unit on the Mongolian border was said to have been sent to fight in Debaltseve in eastern Ukraine. He seemed like a good target because he was very active on Russian social networks.
So this is the profile page of Bato Dambayev on VKcom, which is a popular social network in Russia. And he's got photographs here going back to the year 2013, showing him in his home region, the Buryat Republic in Siberia. Here he's got an album called Army, picture of himself in his Russian army uniform. Here he is with some of his buddies at the base, and here he is taking yet another selfie with a Russian flag patch on his arm.
One of the photographs on Bato's profile is different from the rest. In it, he's wearing a uniform, unlike the ones in any of his other posts. Doesn't have insignia. He's wearing a white armband, and he appears to be standing in a battlefield. This photograph was posted in February, around the time of the battles for Debaltseve. So we headed to Ukraine to see if we could find the place it was taken. So from the photograph, we know that Dambayev was standing on what looks to be like a Ukrainian checkpoint that they'd just taken over. And in the background, we can see some houses with green fences. There's a lot of buildings with green paint on them in this area. We have to find the right one. That kind of looks like it, a little bit. This is the exact spot where an ethnic Asian-looking soldier had his selfie taken in mid-February. He then put that photograph up on a Russian social networking site, and that's why we know that he's a serving officer in the Russian Federation's army, because older posts on his profile page show him photographed back home in Russia at his military base.
So thank you for coming. Hope you found that interesting.